After a really rough last couple of days for the Kings, they get a much needed win against the Jazz. And it's not just that it was the win, but it's also getting Trey Lyles back, getting Sasha Vezenkov back. After what we heard with injury news, with Kevin Huerter already being out for the season, now we lose Malik Monk likely for the rest of the season, 4 to 6 weeks. So we'd have to probably get to the second round of the playoffs to see him again. After losing, two straight to the Mavs, things were looking down. And so it's nice for the Jazz to be there to pick us up a little bit and to get guys back from injury and get that added firepower off of the bench and that added shooting off of the bench, which we were dearly missing. They obviously cannot make up for especially what Malik Monk does, but Kevin Huerter as well. But both of them, Lyles and Vezenkov, are going to be super important to our chances of doing anything and even making the playoffs at this point, either through the play-in or sneaking in to a playoff spot here late. I don't want to offend anyone, but I think the Utah Jazz are the only team in the entire NBA that I'm just never nervous playing against them this season. There's not a minute in any of the games that we've played that I have been nervous against the Jazz. The same cannot be said for teams like the Wizards, Pistons, Spurs, right? So other really bad teams, but for some reason the Jazz, they're just non-threatening, especially with Lauri Markkanen out and a few other injuries that they have. And it was another game against the Jazz where you have Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes both scoring over 20 points. And so when both of them are playing well, it helps, and they tend to do that against the Jazz. And it was just a nice, well-rounded game from everyone, I thought. Just a game to get everyone going a bit and to have everyone kind of find their roles with the return of players, with the injuries of certain players. It might take a little bit for players to figure out how to play. And I think we saw that a little bit with the turnover numbers. Sometimes the offense looked a little weird and the Kings were turning the ball over, or the offense just didn't look great at times with the bench. But then there were other times where it did look good. And so it's all about figuring that out, but you got to obviously figure that out pretty quickly. It was obviously very nice for Keegan Murray to come out, hit 2 for 3 from 3. He's been shooting the ball much better lately. And with him, with the injuries that we have, he needs to take more responsibility offensively, and he needs to take more shots. And he took the most shots out of anyone in this game at 18. In make or miss, he needs to be taking that many shots. He needs to be one of the guys that's taking the most shot attempts, because there was a point early in the season where the Kings tried to make him more of a focal point in the offense, give him the ball more, take the ball away from Barnes and Huerter and give the ball more to Keegan to try to get him more involved in the offense. Because, over the summer, it was like Keegan's expanding his offensive game. And then really where we saw the improvement from Keegan was the defensive end. And in the middle of the season, he kind of took a step back offensively, more focused on defending the best player on the other team, and more shots were going to the likes of Harrison Barnes. But with Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk out, we need him to, again, be more of a focal point in the offense. And I think the same can be said a little bit for Domantas Sabonis, where we need him taking more shots. There can't be games. I think with the offensive weapons we had at times, you want him to take what's given to him. And sometimes that's like 5 shot attempts in a game. And that's totally fine. But I think with the injuries we have, if we want to be successful late in the season, that can't happen. And he needs to force the issue a little bit. And we definitely saw that in this game. He took 14 shot attempts. Like he's not going to be as efficient as he was early in the season if he is more aggressive, and that's fine. But we have to live and die by Sabonis and Keegan being more aggressive offensively and live and die with their shot attempts. And so early on, I think you saw Sabonis trying to be super aggressive, going right at Walker Kessler. And it was a mixed bag. Like there was a possession early where he just took a lot of dribbles. And that's normally not going to be great when he's taking like 5, 6 dribbles into the paint. and he turned it over. I think he had another moment of a turnover trying to dish it to Keegan inside. He got blocked once, he missed a shot. But then he had the moments of, scoring and finding guys for assists. He went 7 for 14. He took a little turnaround fadeaway in the paint. I would like to see him take some of those because we know he can hit it. He missed it in this game, but I want to see him take more of those types of shots, and we need him to, I think, at this point. And so I think you saw he was trying to get himself going early on, and it was a little bit of a mixed bag. And then in the second quarter, out of a timeout, I think you saw Mike Brown trying to get Sabonis going a little bit, and they ran a little inverse pick and roll. Fox setting the pick for Sabonis inside. Sabonis gets going towards the rim and draws the and one. And at that point, he kind of got going a little bit more offensively after a little bit of a shaky, inefficient start. And so you have Domas trying to be more aggressive. You saw Keegan also trying to attack the rim, and at no point in the game did he really like take a backseat and stop shooting, which was good. It always kind of annoys me, like on the broadcast. I feel like they always are like, you don't want to see Keegan, the Kings go away from Keegan. And it's always, they do that like right when he comes back into the game. Like he hasn't scored since, this time in the first quarter. I'm like, yeah, because he's had like 2 possessions since then. But it was good to see him attacking. I also think Davion is going to be super important offensively, taking a little bit of Malik Monk's role. Obviously, he can't take all of Malik Monk's role, but he's going to be a big part in trying to make up for those minutes, and he has to be more of a point guard and more of a playmaker off of the bench rather than just playing off the ball, spotting up for 3, and then playing defense. We know he can create. He's super quick. He can get inside. He's been very efficient scoring the ball lately, and he had a really good game. He went 3 for 6, 1 for 2 from 3, had 8 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds. He had some very good driving kicks. One of them, I can't remember who it was to, but he had one in the first quarter that was really nice that was just missed. And then he had another one where he drove and took a little floater. It didn't go in, but he got the rebound. Then he kicked it back out to, I think it was Lyles, who drained the 3. And so with Malik Monk out, it's just going to need to be a team effort. And so I think you're going to need to see, like I said, Keegan and Sabonis just shooting a lot. I think you need to see Fox playing more with the ball in his hands, which we also saw in this game, and playmaking more, which we very much saw in this game with 12 assists. And then you need to see Davion playing more of a true point guard role and making sure he's being aggressive. So I think those 4 guys need to step up or make adjustments. And I think we pretty much perfectly saw that in this game. But it's one thing to do it against the Jazz. It's another thing to do it against better teams. And so we'll see how that goes. But it was just so refreshing to see Trey Lyles, Sasha Vezenkov check in the game. And Sasha, he came into the game in the first quarter and just came right back out. I don't even know how long he was out there. It felt like no time at all. But then he came back in the second half. But Lyles right away, just going straight at the rim and trying to poster a guy was hilarious. It's like, oh yeah, I think he's doing fine. But he had a really solid game, was knocking down the 3, and was trying to attack the rim, which is great. And then you had Sasha more in the second half when he got more minutes. He came in right when he touches the ball, he's firing that thing and hits the 3. But then with Sasha, it's really just about the cutting and knowing where to be. And he got 2 steals defensively, just knowing where to be. And it's just so obvious he's such a smart player out there. And so I think a lot of the stuff he does doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Like he's making a really nice cut that then, leads to someone having to help onto him, and then another pass gets made. Like he's opening up another player from 3. We saw Kessler Edwards also get in there for a bit, play some solid defense, knock down a 3. And so at this point with Lyles and Sasha back and with Kessler Edwards playing pretty well, like Kessler's kind of getting his chance, and Duarte has kind of been moved to the bench, which is interesting because, Chris Duarte had really good moments, and then he just kind of went cold from 3. Maybe, in a couple games had some dumb fouls, and so then he kind of lost his spot. Like he definitely wasn't horrible. Really the biggest thing was just him going cold from 3, and so it's just someone else's time. But Chris Duarte, he'll probably get another opportunity here, because there are going to be games where, it's not going as kind of perfectly off the bench as it was in this one. I think the defense in the first half was not great. There was a lot of moments of the Jazz getting open, especially from the corners. You had Bryce Sessambaugh just constantly finding himself open from three, Taylor Hendricks as well. And so they were knocking down threes, keeping themselves in the game. Kings were turning the ball over a bit, which again is, understandable. The Kings were still the better team for most of the second quarter, I would say. Although there were some moments of Fox. I think Fox was trying to play good defense in the second quarter, but there were just some moments where he just let a guy by, just kind of being a little unaware. He was trying to get up into guys and really force turnovers, and he did that a couple times, but then there were other times where guys would get by him. And I think the same can be said just with the rotations from the Kings defensively, just weren't totally there in the second quarter, but there were some really good things. Fox's playmaking was really good. He made a really nice pass to the corner to Kessler Edwards for three, and the Kings were trying to push the pace. Didn't always go well. Fox tried to find Keegan because Keegan was hot, but turned it over and they went back the other way. But then there was another time where it was a similar play, but this time Fox, a little more careful, and he found Keegan, and Keegan knocked down the three. Domas was getting it done on the offensive glass. So I think there were just some ups and downs in that second quarter. Maybe the Kings trying to figure out how to play without Malik Monk a bit. They didn't close the quarter well. They allowed some open threes, and the Jazz got right back into it. Although Domas did get a dunk, and then Fox stole the ball with 3 seconds left and then drew a foul. So, a little bit making up for the tough end of the half. But there was also a moment I wanted to highlight where, and they highlighted it on the broadcast going into the second half, so I was kind of happy, but they didn't totally talk about what I really liked about the play. And it was where Keegan cuts when Domas had the ball, I think. And so he's just going from one wing, going down into the paint and then down to the baseline, kind of into the dunker spot. But I think a lot of times you would see him just kind of drift to the corner, and a lot of guys just in general drift to the corner, out to the 3-point line. But what he did instead is he just stayed right in that dunker spot. The ball got swung to Barnes, and Barnes made a really nice pass instead of just swinging to whoever was to the left of him, like Keon or Fox or something. Instead of just swinging it, and the play would probably die there, he made a really nice pass into Keegan, who just stayed at the dunker spot. And you saw Sexton, who tried to recover, he was trying to keep his eye on the ball, and he just assumed Keegan was going to the corner, so he's closing out to the corner, but Keegan's still in the dunker spot, so he just gets an open dunk. And I just thought that was a really nice play from Keegan, and smart to stay right where he was, and just good movement from him. The second half didn't start super well. You had Keegan missing an open three, or the Kings allowing a three, Keegan missing an open three, then Domas falling down, which allowed the Jazz to get open for three in transition. And Mike Brown immediately calls timeout because it was 58-58. And I thought that timeout was interesting because I've wanted Mike Brown to call timeouts earlier, but that actually wasn't really one of the moments that I was thinking he was going to call timeout. There have been plenty of times recently where I thought the Kings came out a little bit lazy and not locked in to start the half, where Mike Brown just let it kind of keep going. This was not one of those moments, I thought. We just got kind of unlucky when Domas fell down and they got an open three in transition, but Mike Brown was like, nah, we're not doing this. And that sparked just a massive run. What was it, 23-2, something like that? And it all was about that great play that they kept running, and they ran it right out of the timeout, where you have Domas screening for Fox, then Keegan coming around screening, popping out to the 3-point line up top, and Fox getting downhill with Domas in the middle there. And so you have Barnes in the opposite corner. And so he finds Keegan up top open on the first one. Then they just, get a stop, run it again. And this time Keegan was still open, but Fox is like, nah, I'll just go to the other option, because Barnes was wide open in the corner. Barnes knocks down the three. Then the Kings got a steal. Another Barnes three. And then they just kept running that same play. They ran it so many times, and it felt like every single time both Keegan and Barnes were both wide open. And the few times they weren't, then Fox would just like snake inside and get a layup. The Jazz just had no idea on how to deal with that. And it just showed off Fox's playmaking, his really good passing in this game. And he was also making some very tough shots around the rim, was getting to the free throw line. I really liked his attacking. Still too many threes for my liking, but he was also attacking. So as long as he's doing those other things, he can get up 7 threes. It's not that many, I guess. But Harrison Barnes was just on fire. Went 6 for 6, I think 4 for 4 from 3 for 16 points in that third quarter. And remember, we had that game early on in the season. Was it the first game of the season? I know we played the Jazz. Yeah, it was the first game of the season. And Barnes absolutely went off in that game. And just everyone on the Kings was knocking down shots, or they were rebounding that miss. But also there's another side to it. So the defensive side of that run, where they only allowed, 2 points while they scored 23. At least I think that's what the run was. And so on the defensive side, you saw a concerted effort to run Bryce Sessenbaugh off the line, because that's the hot guy. You got to run him off the line. Keegan and Keon particularly both had some really nice closeouts. I thought Keegan's technique on his closeout was very, very good. And when they forced him to put the ball on the floor, the results were just not the same for the Jazz as when he was just spotting up from 3. I didn't mention it early on, but Keon got in a little bit of a foul trouble trying to guard Colin Sexton early on. And that is definitely something to watch. I mean, he's learning, and he's been getting into foul trouble early on recently, trying to guard Kyrie Irving. And, Colin Sexton is really good, shifty player. Probably a pretty underrated player. But Keon's been having to learn how to guard these really good scorers, and he's been getting into foul trouble. And so I think that's just something that he'll get better at with time. But he was really good in that third quarter defensively. Domas also was very good guarding the pick and roll defensively. He was getting out onto the guards, not letting them turn the corner. And I don't think it was in the third quarter, but he had one point where he got on a guard and stripped him. And then in that third quarter, it felt like time after time, he was staying in front of the guards, doing a really nice job. I think the only thing that was poor about the Kings' defense in the third quarter was the defensive rebounding. The Jazz got 11 offensive rebounds. They only got 22 defensive rebounds, which is a pretty wild number to look at. But the Kings were giving it right back to them on the other end with 13 offensive rebounds. And that's with the Kings shooting really well. So when you shoot 53% from the field, 50% from 3, there aren't going to be a lot of rebounds. And so the Kings had 13 offensive rebounds to the Jazz's 22 defensive rebounds. So that is great. But, Walker Kessler is tough to box out down low, and the Jazz were doing a good job of crashing, and they have some athletic forwards. So that was a little tough to deal with, and it was why we had to sweat out the Sabonis double-double a little bit. He didn't get it until pretty late, but he got an offensive rebound midway through the fourth quarter to secure that double-double. Things got a little chaotic towards the end of the third quarter. There were some moments of the bench having really good ball movement. There was a play where the ball just kept moving around. Nobody quite had a shot. Like, it got out to Davion up top, and he didn't quite have the space, so he takes one dribble, and then everyone just keeps moving it. It comes back to Davion. This time, he has a little more space, and he's able to, drive by his guy, because whoever it was closing out hard, because Davion's been shooting the 3 better. And so that's a big deal for him to then be able to get inside off of his 3-point shot. And he went inside and finished. And so there were some good moments of that ball movement. Sasha's off-ball movement was super important. But then there were some times of the bench offense being a little chaotic, some misses around the rim. You had the Jazz also missing a lot around the rim. And so there was a point where it was getting a little tough to score for sure. The start of the fourth quarter, Fox was in there, but he wasn't really getting to the rim. He was settling from 3 a bit, and the rest of the bench offense wasn't quite clicking. But Davion had some really nice plays to kind of pick it up. And the defense in that fourth quarter, it definitely wasn't great. The Kings had a big, 20-point to 14-point lead. And it was a little annoying, around the 6 minute mark. It's like the Kings just wouldn't get a stop. So they couldn't quite put the game away. The Jazz were crashing the boards hard. The Kings offense was a bit rough, at least until Fox came back into the game. Then the offense got a lot better. And so the Kings were kind of just outscoring them or keeping pace with the Jazz scoring wise. But they weren't quite putting them away because it just felt like they weren't totally in it defensively, right? They were cruising a bit. And I was just like, can we just put them away? Like, we don't have the same defensive intensity. I mean, I get it. But finally, with like 4 minutes left, the Kings locked in defensively, had a few good possessions in a row for just like a little over a minute, and that put the game away. And because that's all we needed. Like, just string together 2-3 stops in a row and this game's over, and that's what they did. That garbage time unit came in for the Kings, and our garbage time I can't talk. Our garbage time unit was kind of outplaying, or at least keeping pace with the Jazz. Like, they had their starters out there, and I'm like, man, if you've seen our garbage time units in the past this season, like, that's really sad if you're getting beat by them. And so our garbage time unit is like what the Jazz were actually playing out there. So I think that just shows the level the Jazz are at with the injuries that they have right now. Just a few other notes from some guys that I didn't really touch on. We had Keon Ellis, had a little bit of a quiet game offensively, but had 8 rebounds. And I really noticed him crashing the glass hard. And so that was very nice to see him and Davion combining for a lot of rebounds. He also looked comfortable on the ball and just creating. And he's gotten a lot more comfortable. It feels like on the ball, like super quickly. His first, few games of meaningful minutes this season, or like, maybe 5-10 games, he did not look really comfortable at all. And then it feels like he's kind of gotten it together really quickly, and he looks more comfortable on the ball. Not a primary playmaker by any means, I don't think, but it's good to see him be able to handle the ball. Also, I think Harrison Barnes showing why he will always be valuable, because he can just sit out there and knock down threes, and he can get to the rim as well. These last 2 games, he's been able to get to the rim pretty well and finish there, and he has some tough finishes. The Kings now finish up at home against the Los Angeles Clippers before they go on a really tough four game road trip. And so obviously we're getting down to it. I think we're 4 games back of the Clippers, so unlikely that we'll catch them, but not impossible at this point. So win that game and you give yourselves a shot. Obviously, I think it's pretty unlikely at this point that we do make the top 6. Again, not impossible, but with the way Dallas is playing right now, with how far we are from the Clippers, and I don't really see the Pelicans dropping off all that much, pretty unlikely. So at this point, it's like you just got to stay in front of the Lakers, and then also try to stay in front of the Suns so that we're hosting the 7-8 play-in game. And so let's just go through it. You have Clippers, Knicks, Celtics, Nets, Thunder, then come back home, Pelicans, Suns, Trailblazers. So you're thinking Trailblazers, Nets should be dubs, and then you got to get 2 or 3 out of the other ones. That's probably reasonable. So we just got to start, at home against the Clippers. It'll also be interesting playing in Boston. I mean, we always just get demolished by Boston, but it's late in the season. They have the overall number 1 seed locked up. They're just out here trying things, apparently, which, fair enough. So, maybe we could steal that game. But then a game against the Suns late in the season, that one's going to be huge. And who knows, maybe that game against the Pelicans will be huge as well. But we don't have the tiebreaker over the Pelicans. Obviously going 0-4 against them so far this season. So that one probably won't mean all that much, other than just, it being another game that we need to win to try to stay in front of the teams. But it won't mean much for chasing down the Pelicans, probably. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Royal Report. I will be back on Tuesday night to recap that game against the Los Angeles Clippers. Peace.